श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। ओम समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ओम श्रीमद् भगवद गीता अध्याय 4 परम पूज्य गुरुदेव स्वामी चिन्मयानंद का कमेंट्री होली गीता Chapter 4 Ending Action in Knowledge. Introduction. For the iron mind, novelty in the spiritual kingdom has no charm. Any new idea, however logical and intellectual it may be, is not readily acceptable by the children of the Aryan culture as a part of their Brahmavidya, unless the interpreter of the new idea can show that his technique has already been envisaged in the existing scriptures of this culture. In this way, we can say that we are Veda bound as a cultural unit. In the last chapter, Krishna propounded a revolutionary idea in the form of Karma Yoga, which sounded as though it was a novel intellectual theory cooked in Krishna's own brain. Arjuna, as a true student of the Hindu culture, would not willingly accept it unless his teacher gave an endorsement that what he had lectured upon was nothing other than an intelligent reinterpretation of the ancient sacred Vedic science. In this chapter, an all-out effort is made by Krishna to bring home to Arjuna that the Lord himself, the author of the Vedas, had been asserting the same old Vedic truth and nothing new. Again, whenever a teacher in his inspiration emphasizes a particular stage of self-development, chances are that the dull-witted seekers may misunderstand the import of the words and conclude that the partial path explained is the entire route to the infinite. In order to remove this misunderstanding, the fourth chapter indicates the greater path of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, which is the only main archway through which all pilgrims must pass in order to reach the temple of the self. Up to this archway, seekers living in different psychological and intellectual domains may walk their own paths. But the main gate is Jnana Yoga, through which all must pass to have darshana at the glorious altar. According to Shankara, this yoga alone forms the subject of the Lord's teachings throughout the Gita. A secular science can be successfully taught and ingrained on the grey matter of the student by any teacher. It is not at all necessary that the student must have any love for or faith in or reverence towards the teacher, who is in such a case nothing more than an instrument of instruction. Thus, today, a professor in a modern college is only a talking instrument which with as much importance as the blackboard or the desk or the platform. But on the other hand, if a cultural flavor, a moral dignity, and an ethical glow are to be imparted to the personality of the student, it is essential that the student must approach his teacher in a spirit of reverence and love, devotion and friendliness. These are the emotional requirements which alone can bring about the necessary conditions in us, so that when the teacher drops his divine apparel, it may fall upon our shoulders. To Arjuna, Lord Krishna was only a friend The cowherd boy of Vrindavana, familiarity, if it does not breed contempt, is at least sure to pull down the familiar in our estimation of its importance and sanctity. This chapter is also intended to invoke in Arjun's mind the necessary amount of reverence and respect towards his charioteer. In short, Krishna is here divesting himself of his workaday clothes and is putting on for the first time his full divine apparel of omnipotence and omniscience, and the aura of God descended upon the earth. Through an earlier training in Karma Yoga, when an individual has integrated his mind and intellect, he becomes fit for the absorption and assimilation of the great truth. Through the process of contemplation and meditation, therefore, there is a strong recommendation of the path of knowledge in this chapter. The Blessed Lord said, श्रीभगवानुवाच इमं विवस्वते योगं प्रोक्तवानहमव्ययं विवस्वान्मनवे प्राह मनुरिक्ष्वाकवे ब्रवीत. First verse. I taught this imperishable yoga to Vivaswan. Vivaswan taught it to Manu. Manu taught it to Ikshvaku. As we said in our introduction to this chapter, the Lord is making an open statement that what he had been saying so far was nothing other than an intelligent reiteration of what is the content of the immortal Vedas. Inspired by a divine remembrance, the Lord declares that He Himself, at the very beginning of creation, imparted the knowledge of the Vedas to the Son. Later on, the Sun God conveyed it to his son Manu, the ancient lawgiver of India. Manu, in his turn, declared it to Ikshvaku, the ancestor of the solar dynasty, who ruled over Ayodhya for a long period of time. The word Veda is derived from the root Ved, to know. Veda therefore means knowledge. The knowledge of divinity lurking in man and a technique by which it can be brought out to full manifestation are the themes of the Veda textbooks, and the truth of this theme is eternal. Just as we can say that electricity is eternal, as there was electricity even before the first scientist discovered it, and electrical energy will not be exhausted because of our forgetfulness of its existence, so too the divine nature of man will never be destroyed because of our non assertion of it. The knowledge of the divine content and its possibility is in man are indeed eternal. The creation of the universe, it is accepted even by modern science, must have started with the sun as the source of all energy. The sun was the first of the created objects, and with its very creation, this great knowledge of the self was given out to the world. The theme of Vedic literature being the subjective divinity, language fails to express it completely. No deep experience can be exhaustively expressed in words. Therefore, a study of the scriptures by one's own self is apt to create misunderstanding in the mind of the student rather than a right appreciation of it. Thus, it is a time honored tradition in India that spiritual lessons are directly heard from a true master who has vivid inner experiences in the realm of the spirit. It has been handed down from master to disciple and we have been given here the identity of the earliest students of Brahma Vidya. Second verse. एवं परंपरा प्राप्तम इदम इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तप. This knowledge, handed down thus in regular succession, the royal sages knew. This yoga, by long lapse of time, has been lost here, O Parantapa, burner of the force. This yoga, the yoga in which the Vedic teachings regarding activity pravrutti and retirement nivrutti are comprehended, thus handed down in regular succession among the royal stages, has its own destinies at certain periods of history. This knowledge seems to be readily available for the service of mankind, but at certain other periods of history, it falls into disuse and becomes, as it were, defunct. The golden era of spirituality dies down to inaugurate the dark ages of undivine life. At such periods of monstrous materialism, the generation is not left in neglect to suffer and groan under its own negative values. For at that time, some great master appears on the horizon to inspire, to encourage, and to lead the generation away from the ruts of sorrow onto the high roads of cultural revival. Krishna rightly evaluates the period of the Mahabharata and declares this yoga by long lapse of time has been lost here, seeing that the yoga had been lost by falling into the hands of the weak who could not control their senses, and seeing that the generation had not been able to attain the object of life. The Lord adds the following. The same ancient yoga has been today taught to you by me, for you are my devotee and my friend. This is a supreme secret. Third verse. Saivayam maya tetya yoga prokta puratanaha bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam yetaduttamam. With a direct statement in the style of an open confession, Krishna is here removing all possible misgivings of the orthodox by insisting that the truth he has declared in the last chapter, Karma Yoga, is nothing other than the same ancient yoga. A master can feel really inspired and instruct efficiently only when he establishes a certain type of affectionate rapport with the student. Krishna finds that his friend Arjun is fully devoted to him and that he will certainly follow the path indicated by him. The relationship between teacher and taught should not be a mere commercial arrangement of you pay and I teach. Mind and intellect blossom forth only in a warmer climate of love and freedom, friendship and mutual understanding. These qualities required for a healthy transference of the subjective knowledge were found in full measure in Arjuna, and therefore Krishna says, I taught you this yoga in the earlier chapter. The secrecy mentioned here only indicates that a man, however wise he might be, may not come to suspect the existence of the Atman in himself without being so advised by a man of experience. The self being that which is beyond the intellect, the reasoning capacity in a man cannot come to suspect the existence of the eternal, changeless, conscious principle, subtler than the intellect, ever illumining the thoughts rising in the very intellect. Hence, the science of truth is called here as the supreme secret. In order not to leave in anybody's mind an impression that any inconsistent statement has been made by the Lord, Arjun asks as though raising an objection. Arjun said, latter was your birth, and prior was the birth of Vivaswan. Son, how am I to understand that you taught this yoga in the beginning? Verse number 4. Arjuna Vacha Aparam Bhavato Janma Param Janma Vivasvataha कथमेतद्विजानीयां त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति. There is a palpable anachronism in the opening stanza of this chapter. Krishna says that he taught this eternal truth to Lord Son in the beginning of creation. It was quite natural for Arjun to think of Krishna as the son of Devaki, the flute bearer of Gokula. To Arjun, this charioteer Krishna had a definite date of birth and was only his own contemporary and was only his own contemporary. Therefore, Krishna himself could not have advised the son, who, by all calculations, is the one who manifested in nature much earlier than all the planetary worlds. To remove from the minds of the hasty readers this the possible misunderstanding that Krishna, the son of Devaki, is the speaker of the Gita, Vyasa makes the blessed Lord declare the following. The blessed Lord said, many births of mine have passed as well as yours, O Arjun. I know them all, but you know them not. O Parantapa, scorcher of foes. Verse number 5. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava charjuna tanyaham veda sarvani natvam vetha parantapa. The scriptural masters of the Hindus exhibit an infinite amount of patience and understanding, which almost amounts to an intellectual daring, and they readily come out to satisfy all possible doubts of all the students. Here we find Krishna trying to explain how he was the very infinite in his real nature, and that he had himself in the very beginning of creation given out Brahma Vidya to Lord Son. In this section, we find an exhaustive discussion of the theory of incarnation, avatara, as propounded in the Puranic literature. To many foreigners, this portion of the Hindu philosophy and belief has been very confusing, and many of them have expressed such opinions about it, and perhaps none has put it so vehemently as Max Muller. Max Muller criticized the theory of reincarnation as metaphysical twaddle and scholastic hair splitting. But when we try to understand it with a sufficient background of the Vedantic concept of creation, it is not very difficult for us to follow the idea. We have elsewhere explained in the fall of man how, when the infinite reality functions through inactivity, sattva, we have the concept of the God principle. Lord later on in this section, Krishna himself explains how he, in all freedom, takes upon himself the matter envelopments and plays the game of the immortal among the mortals, but all the time himself being ever conscious of his own complete divine nature. Not a single mortal embodiment can be the result of sheer accident. Every man comes to the field of the world only as a result of his evolutionary progress, even according to the Darwinian theory. Each embodied life indicates a long autobiography of that ego, and it is only after a long chain of existence in different forms that it has at last reached its present destination. In each life, as soon as the ego expresses itself in the given field of activity, fortunately forgets the entire past and carries with it only a distinct flavor, vasana, therefore thereof. But a mastermind like Lord Krishna, in his divine omniscience, understands the both. He and Arjun had been through many vicissitudes of existence, and that I know them all, while you know them not. How then can you, the eternal Lord, have a birth in the absence of dharma and adharma? Listen, verse number 6. अजोऽपि सन्नव्ययात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामधिष्ठाय सम्भवाम्यात्ममायया. Though I am unborn and I am of imperishable nature, and though I am the Lord of all beings, yet, ruling over my own nature, I take birth by my own Maya. This is the most daring and original thought of Vyasa, we may say, throughout the entire Gita. The Supreme, on account of his unquestioned freedom, by his own perfectly free will, takes upon himself the conditioning of matter and manifests himself in a particular embodiment in the world for serving the deluded generation of that time. To the Lord, his ignorance is but a pose assumed, not a fact lived. A mortal becomes victimized by the avidya, while the Lord is master of his Maya. A driver is bound by his duty to the vehicle, while the owner of the vehicle is lord of it. He uses the vehicle for his purposes, and whenever he reaches his immediate destination, he leaves the vehicle with all freedom and enjoys his own independent activities. But the poor driver bound to the vehicle will have to guard it against intruders and serve the vehicle as its servant. The Lord uses the matter envelopments and their limitations as a convenience and as a set of necessary tools in his game of protecting the creation. Thus, though the Lord is unborn and changeless in his nature, and even a law and ever a lord of matter, yet keeping his Maya perfectly under his own control, he comes into the world through his own free will. All the time he is fully conscious of his own divine status and unchanged prerogative. He does not come into being as others do, compelled by his past karma to live here in the world under the thraldom of nature. He is not bound by his mental temperaments, but he is ever free from the mischiefs of his own Maya. You ask your servant to take your heavy motorcycle to the nearby garage for refilling it. If you watch him doing it, you will have some idea of what the Lord is saying to express here, or Lord is trying to express here. To that poor man, the unwieldy machine is a calamity, a suffering. To push it across the road is a risky adventure for him, because the machine might, in its own weight, guides him. The machine, by its own weight, guides him, he being powerless to assert his mastery over it. On the other hand, if you yourself were to ride or push the motorcycle, you can joyously and easily do so, the vehicle remaining the same. In your hands, it becomes a slave to carry you, while the poor servant was being dragged by the clumsy weight of the heavy machine. To an ordinary man who is ignorant of the working of his vehicle, it becomes a painful agony and a difficult responsibility to make use of these instruments. To the Lord, the world is no problem, and his personal equipments and their appetites are always perfectly under his own control. He comes to Lord over every situation. This perfect freedom of a God man could not have been more beautifully brought out in so few words as in these incomparable lines. When and for what purpose is the divine, infinite so bound? The answer follows. Verse number 7. यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्. Whenever there is a decay of righteousness, O Bharat, and a rise of unrighteousness, then I manifest myself. Whenever there is a decline of dharma, I create for myself a body. The term dharma has already been exhaustively explained. Dharma, the law of being, is a sacred truth, and when the majority of the members of a community do not obey this great truth, there is a conquest of the world by a herd or biped animals, and not a cooperative, happily living family of men pursuing life in their old dignity as intelligent social beings. In all such dark periods of history, some great master comes to present himself or as the leader of men to revive the standard of living and its moral values. This is generally done not only by giving a fillip to the existing nobler values, but also by a corresponding policy of total elimination of the wicked. It is for this purpose that the infinite from time to time wears the matter apparel and appears on the scene of activity like the owner of an estate who now and then puts on his gumboots to inspect the and reorganize the estate. Even while he is on the work spot in the burning sun among his workers, he is conscious of his lordship over and ownership of the entire estate. Similarly, the supreme, which is the substratum for the pluralistic world, puts on the body gown and, as it were, walks into the dusky atmosphere of the immoral life of mankind for the purpose of reorganizing and conducting a thorough spring cleaning of the bosom of man. In the descent of law, God explained here, it is very clearly said that the Lord takes upon himself a body projected for the purpose by himself, and that he reserves for himself the divine freedom to be in it and yet not of it. Then I body myself forth. For what purpose? Verse number 8. परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्मसंस्थापनार्थाय सम्भवामि युगे युगे. It is quite for the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked, and for the establishment of righteousness, I am born in every age. It is quite evident that the infinite cannot project itself forth unless there is some desire. The state of desirelessness is but the state of actionlessness. Without some equipment or the other, electricity cannot of its own accord manifest itself. Similarly, the Supreme cannot and need not project out into a divine or an undivine form as an immortal, omniscient God or as a mortal, foolish ego, unless there is some desire or the other to precipitate the manifestation. A supersaturated solution, if left alone, undisturbed, can carry its extra quantity of crystals in itself. But the moment of but the moment a minutest particle of the same substance is thrown into that beaker, immediately all the extra crystals get thrown out in crystal form. Similarly, the dynamic supreme, the womb of infinite potentialities, cannot bring forth any form or forms unless there is an intention. It may be divine, it may be good, it may be bad. The desire that made the Supreme assume the divine form of Krishna, the enchanting cowboy, the blue lover of all, is here explained in Vyasa's own words. In the stanza, Vyasa makes Krishna confess his initial desire that caused his manifestation. The divinest of all desires is indeed a selfless thirst to serve the world, but all the same, it is a desire in order to protect the good when the absolute starts its godly career. It is the very necessity of Maya that the it is the very necessity of Maya that he, the very Lord of delusion, has to take upon himself one more added mission, the destruction of the wicked. Here, destruction is not annihilation of the individuals as much as the removal of the wrong tendencies in the individuals. It is a process of refitting the wardrobe wherein some old clothes are irredeemably spoiled and have to be eliminated in order to make more space for newly made and other refitted items. Similarly, prophets, when they come, they encourage the good, sometimes they rejuvenate the bad, and often eliminate the poisonous specimens from the garden of life. This much Lord Krishna was compelled to explain about himself because he was perfectly evident that Arjun was blissfully unaware of the true divine nature of Krishna. हरि ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की